This is Inside Indiana Business Radio for the afternoon of Monday, May 13th, 2024. I'm Kate Sharon. Officials on Monday cut the ribbon on the $649 million South Shore Line double-track project, which adds 17 miles of new track between Michigan City and Gary, 14 additional trains, and reduces travel time to downtown Chicago by about 30 minutes. For South Shore Line President Mike Nolan, the project's completion after 8 years of planning and construction is beyond exciting.
The infrastructure improvements that are going into this railroad now, there's stuff that we've dreamed of for years, and the fact that the reality and this railroad is basically going to be reborn and renewed in such a way to provide the opportunities for such wonderful service improvements. We can't be more thrilled.
Between the double track project and the rail line's $945 million Westlake Corridor extension, an additional $2.7 billion in private investment is projected for Northwest Indiana, resulting in more than 6,000 new jobs and $5 billion in economic impact by 2048, according to the governor's office. The project was funded by $197 million in federal funding from the Federal Transit Administration and the American Rescue Program. The remaining funds include $340 million in state funding, $80 million in local funding, and up to $30 million from the Northern Indiana Commuter Transportation District, which manages the South Shore Line. A set of final rules by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency could finally push electric utilities and other power generators to better monitor and clean up the coal ash around Indiana and the nation. For the first time, federal regulations will cover the nearly 50 dumps spread across 14 locations in Indiana that were previously exempt from cleanup provisions. The regulations will force big players and policymakers in Indiana to deal with what some see as a major environmental problem. To environmentalists, the scores of coal ash ponds that have sprung up around Indiana power plants over the decades are a looming threat to public health and water supplies. Most are near rivers and filled with toxic chemicals, including arsenic and mercury. But to the energy industry, the ponds are a necessary byproduct of burning mountains of coal over the years to produce cheap electricity for Hoosiers. They insist Indiana's 86 ponds, more than any other state, are safe and the risk of harm is low. State Representative Rita Fleming, a Democrat from Jeffersonville, announced Monday morning she will retire from serving in the Indiana General Assembly to spend more time with her family. Fleming has served House District 71, which includes Jeffersonville, Clarksville, and some of New Albany, since 2018. She was re-elected for a third time in 2022 and would have been up for re-election this November after winning her primary unopposed last week. Democrats plan to caucus another candidate into Fleming's vacancy ahead of the November general election. Republican challenger Scott Hawkins, whom Fleming narrowly beat in 2022, will also be on the ballot. From the number one source for Indiana business news, this is Inside Indiana Business Radio.
Indiana, your bold future starts here. IBJ Media, Inside Indiana Business, and the Indiana Economic Development Corporation invite you to the Engage Indiana series, presented by CareSource, Indiana University, and Old National Bank. With an unrelenting focus on growing Indiana's economy, our Engage Indiana events take place in every region of the state. Discover when we'll be in your area at ibj.com/engage.
Indiana's revenue collections missed projections in April. The Indiana State Budget Agency said Friday that general fund revenues from last month totaled $2.7 billion, which was 12.6% lower than the December 2023 forecast and 5.1% lower than the same month last year. The agency attributed the results to, quote, unusual payment timing as taxpayers adjust to the recent tax law changes. Year-to-date, general fund revenues totaled just under $17.5 billion, which is $23.3 million above the December 2023 forecast and 2% higher than the same period in the previous fiscal year. The Indiana Donor Network, an organ tissue and cornea recovery and donation organization, named Dr. Paul Lange its Vice President of Clinical Operations and Medical Director last week. In his new position, Lange will oversee organ and tissue recovery operations and research. He served in a similar role at the Donor Alliance in Denver since 2021. Outside of his time in the organ donation sphere, Lange spent 3 decades in graduate and undergraduate medical education, holding leadership roles throughout. He also spent 15 years at Ascension Borgess Health in Michigan, where he was an intensivist, chief of the Department of Critical Care Medicine, and later president of the medical group. In the nearly 6 years since a federal law appeared to open the doors to Delta 8, the marijuana-like drug has grown into a billion-dollar Hoosier industry, but it's done so on shaky legal ground, leaving retailers and law enforcement officials alike seeking legislative clarification. Is Delta 8 allowed in Indiana? IIB's Alex Brown has more.
Lawmakers indicate a Senate-House stalemate is unlikely to give, even with the state on the hook for a year-old lawsuit over the hemp-derived psychoactive status. Congress revived the industrial hemp industry in 2018's agriculture-focused farm bill by removing the plant and its seeds from the definition of marijuana. Hoosier lawmakers in 2018 legislation used the same Delta-9 cutoff in legalizing low-THC hemp extracts and added more hemp-related regulations in another law the following year. It's generally considered legal as long as it contains less than 0.3% Delta-9 THC, the major psychoactive component in the plant, by dry weight. Although Republicans hold supermajorities in both the Senate and House, the two chambers disagree on some issues, including on Delta-8. Lawmakers have since tried to walk back the partial legalization, while others have made full legalization efforts. The contention escalated into a lawsuit last June when Indiana Attorney General Todd Rokita opined that Delta-8 is illicit. The advisory came in response to an Indiana State Police and Indiana Prosecuting Attorneys Council request for guidance. Retailers sued, alleging raids and other repercussions. Some on both sides of the equation still want answers from the State House. Alex Brown, Inside Indiana Business Radio.
Indiana Secretary of Commerce David Rosenberg is this week's guest on the Business and Beyond podcast with Gary Dick, presented by PNC, a weekly conversation with high-profile Hoosiers in business, sports, entertainment, and beyond, available now from your favorite podcast provider. I'm Kate Sharon for Inside Indiana Business, Radio on Demand.